House Bill 2097 concerns the treatment of survivors of sexual assault in Virginia's hospitals, and there is a substitute.
All right.
If
Anybody
it
have the
pleases the
substitute?
committee.
Would you go ahead and proceed while the substitute's being passed out, Delegate Hudson?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope it should come as no surprise that the #1 concern of survivors seeking treatment in Virginia's hospitals is pregnancy. Most people don't want to be forced to bear a child after non-consensual intercourse. There are effective medical interventions to protect survivors. We call them emergency contraception, and they take two forms. There are more oral emergency contraception pills. The most common trade names are Ella and Plan B, and those pills are effective in many scenarios, but not all. Their efficacy decreases with the patient's BMI, and they are also less effective during the period of ovulation. For that reason, medical providers treating these patients will often pursue a second intervention, intrauterine devices, which can be more effective when treating patients with higher BMIs or during the period of ovulation, which I hope we all know is not an exact science to pin down and is best estimated from the patient's last reported period. In working with forensic nurse examiners and sexual assault nurse examiners in my district, I have heard increasing reports that the addition of that additional opportunity to intervene in a potential pregnancy, is not always covered by the Virginia Crime Victims Fund, and is not always available depending on the prescriber who is on duty in facilities that night. And so what this bill would do is ensure that survivors of sexual assault can receive the most appropriate course of treatment for their situation through two mechanisms. One, it would require that the Virginia Crime Victims Fund cover intrauterine devices and oral emergency contraceptive pills in the same way that the fund currently pays for rape examination kits. In addition, it would require that hospitals have in place plans to ensure that patients who are reporting can receive that treatment, even if an individual provider may have objections on moral or religious grounds to writing the order for that treatment. Importantly, nothing in this bill would require an individual provider to administer emergency contraceptions in violation of their personal moral or religious objections to that treatment. It simply requires that the hospitals have in place a plan to ensure provision of that care if an individual provider would object. The bill is supported by several groups of healthcare providers who are here today to testify, and if it pleases the committee, I would love to invite them to do so at this time.
And Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the substitute.
All right, motion to adopt the substitute. Is there a second? Everybody indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
2 minutes.
We have 2 minutes, and those in favor of the bills, if you could step forward quickly.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing this time. Last year, my name is Renee Branson. I'm the Executive Director of the Sexual Assault Resource Agency in Charlottesville, Virginia. Last year, our organization accompanied 145 sexual assault survivors at the UVA hospital. And a key component of care and in their healing, both physical and emotional, begins with the return of their autonomy and self-control over the health care that they receive. And as Delegate Hudson mentioned, that includes the ability to have access to emergency contraception. And that's why that power and control of care is assured through the Bill 2097 by providing payment of all emergency contraception through the Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund. And I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Apple. I'm Commissioner on Government Relations for the Virginia Nurses Association and a family nurse practitioner. Not only do we represent the interests of 119,000 registered nurses, we also represent the interests of our most vulnerable patients in the Commonwealth. Perpetrators of sexual violence often target those who are most vulnerable. Those living in poverty are particularly at risk. The Crime Victims Fund was intended to shift the financial burden to perpetrators of sexual violence rather than survivors of sexual violence. But unfortunately, many have been denied access to the most effective method of emergency contraception. Not only is IUD arguably the most effective method of emergency contraception, it also virtually eliminates the risk for unintended or unpleasant side effects like nausea, vomiting, headache, side effects which, as you can imagine, are particularly uncomfortable as a person tries to emotionally and physically recover from the assault.
We have less than 30 seconds.
Sure. When deemed clinically appropriate, the Virginia Nurses Association feels that all victims of sexual violence should have access to this method of contraception, and we ask for your support in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a few nurses and content matter experts that would like to speak to this via Zoom if possible.
Well, we're going to get their up or down on this. We've got to keep the clock going. Quickly, if you could.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'm Nicole Lauder. I represent the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. We do support access to contraception, including emergency contraception. We thank the patron for the bill. She did a great job of explaining the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead and take the Zoom first.
Okay, next we have one on Zoom, and who is? Do we have one or two? Is there a Ms. Kelly?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Karen Kelly. I'm here on behalf of the Virginia affiliate of the American College of Nurse Midwives, and we agree with everybody who's already spoken today. We thank Delegate Hudson for introducing this bill. I just want to be very clear in keeping it brief that emergency contraception works by preventing ovulation or fertilization. It prevents pregnancy. It does not induce abortion nor disrupt an established pregnancy. By the time a rape victim arrives at a facility, hours may have already elapsed since the rape took place. The more time that passes between the assault and the onset of the emergency contraception being provided, the less likely it will be effective pregnancy prevention. Securing funding to assure this option is accessible to all is the only compassionate outcome for victims in their time of need. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. And we have one more?
No.
All right, that's it. Okay, time is up.
Opponents.
I'm sorry.
3 minutes for the opponents. We need equal time.
All right, is there anybody here opposed to the bill?
You might say you're going to give them 3 minutes.
Okay, there's 3 minutes total, and I'm not sure how many we have in line, so just keep your comments real close, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Jeff Caruso with the Virginia Catholic Conference. We certainly support compassionate care for survivors of sexual assault. We also support Virginia's current conscience law, and we also oppose public funding of abortion. We have two concerns about this bill. One of the drugs in particular that was mentioned by the patron, that being Ella, can sometimes cause abortions. So by bringing in the funding for the public funding that was mentioned, this would be public funding of abortion. Secondly, this would be a mandate on certain providers. And that would seem to us to conflict with the current conscience law in Virginia, that being on 18.2-75 in our code. There's a conscience law that says that hospitals and healthcare providers do not have to provide abortions against their beliefs. So to protect our current conscience law and also to make sure that we're not publicly funding abortions, those would be our two concerns about this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Joe Hilbert with the Health Department. The administration is strongly opposed to the bill. Also believe it creates a conflict with the conscience clause in the current code and also establishes a mandate.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Next.
Susan Musket, President of Pro Family Women, and we also oppose the bill for the reason stated that it would have a conflict with Virginia's current conscience protection law, and also the concern being that Virginia cherishes religious liberty, and so we urge you to oppose this bill.
Thank you. Next.
Todd Gackey on behalf of the Family Foundation. For the reasons already stated, we are opposed to the legislation.
Thank you. Anybody else in opposition? All right. Delegate Hudson, last word. Oh, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Delegate Tran.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, a number of the witnesses spoke out about this, how this bill may be in opposition to our current conscience clause. I would like to draw attention to lines 208 to 211 of the substitute. Dispensing or administering a complete course of emergency contraception in the form or forms requested by the survivor of sexual assault after the survivor is provided with information pursuant to subdivision 4 and in accordance with the currently accepted professional standards of care. This is the part I'd like to highlight. including in instances of moral and religious objections by individual healthcare providers. At this time, I'd like to ask our counsel if you could clarify if that actually helps to address medical providers who would like to abstain from providing this type of emergency assistance.
Mr. Chair, Delegate Tran, this, so the statute does, or as written, it does require the hospitals to develop policies that allow for individual providers to not have to administer anything that would conflict with their own personal religious beliefs.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So counsel, I think that I just want to make sure I understand and folks in the room understand that addresses the concern around the conscience clause, that it still remains.
Thank you, Delegate Tran. All right, bills before us. Oh, I'm sorry, Delegate Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Delegate Tran for elevating those lines in the bill. Nothing in the bill does violate the existing conscience clause. I also just want to repeat the voices who supported the bill. Formal support for the bill came from obstetricians, gynecologists, nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, the people who we're counting on to treat these patients every day. And if the administration wants to maintain the stance that it would continue to respect exceptions for abortion in the cases of rape, then the best time to intervene in an unwanted pregnancy from rape is before it ever starts, with emergency contraception, which is exactly what this bill concerns.
Thank you, Delegate Hudson. All right, the bill is before us.
I move lay on the table.
Is there a second? This motion lay on the table in a second. Please indicate your vote on the board. Thank you, Delegate Hudson. The bill lay on the table is before us is 4-1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.